It was supposed to be just another night out, nothing fancy, no big expectations. My partner and I had been running on empty for weeks, buried in work and the stress of daily life. So when they suggested we head out for a drink, I jumped at the chance. It felt like we needed to reconnect, just the two of us, outside the chaos of everything else. We agreed to go to a trendy bar downtown, the kind of place that had an energy about it. The music was always just loud enough to make it feel like an escape, but not so loud that we couldn't talk. It had a comfortable vibe, the perfect mix of busy and intimate. As we got ready, I felt a rush of excitement. There was something about getting dressed up that made me feel like the night would be full of possibilities. We both looked good, a little more polished than usual, and that made me smile. We were putting in the effort for each other, and I liked that. We hadn't done anything like this in a while. It felt like a much-needed break from the grind. We arrived at the bar, and it was buzzing with people. The atmosphere was warm, a mix of laughter, clinking glasses, and upbeat conversation. I could feel the tension in my shoulders easing as soon as we walked through the door. It felt good to be out, to be doing something different. We found a spot near the bar, ordered a couple of drinks, and settled in. Everything was relaxed, the way it was supposed to be. We joked around, talked about random things, and it felt like we were in sync. It was easy, effortless, like we hadn't missed a beat. But as the night went on, something started to feel off. At first, it was small things. The way my partner was scanning the room a little too much, or how they kept laughing a bit too loudly at things other people said. I chalked it up to the environment. The bar was full of interesting people, and they were probably just enjoying the night. But as the evening continued, I started to notice something more, something that tugged at me, made me feel like I was standing just a bit too far outside of our own little world. It wasn't just the laughter or the glances. It was the way my partner started to focus more on her. She wasn't someone I knew well, but I recognized her from a few of the other nights we'd come here. She was in her late 20s with a confidence that immediately drew attention. Her laugh was loud and carefree, and her energy was magnetic. She was one of those people who could walk into a room and immediately take over the space. I saw how my partner's attention shifted when she walked by. At first, I thought it was just one of those things people notice other people, it happens. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. My partner was looking at her more, laughing more with her. I wasn't the jealous type, I never had been, but there was a certain energy in the way they interacted that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't just friendly banter. It felt charged. I could feel myself being pushed to the side, like I wasn't even part of the equation anymore, and that hurt. I tried to focus on my own drink, on the conversation happening around me, but I couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. My partner and I had always had a kind of unspoken understanding. Sure, we flirted sometimes, who didn't? But this was different. I knew them, I could tell when they were just being playful and when something else was going on. It wasn't just the physical proximity, it was the way my partner's body language had shifted. They leaned in closer to her, exchanged more private jokes, and even shared moments that felt more intimate than I'd ever expected to see in a public place like this. I could feel the distance between us growing with each passing minute. I wanted to say something, to ask if something was going on, but I couldn't find the right words. The last thing I wanted to do was start an argument in the middle of what was supposed to be a fun night. But as the night wore on, the pit in my stomach grew larger. I glanced at my partner again, and there it was, the unmistakable spark in their eyes. They were no longer just enjoying a night out. There was something more to it. Something I hadn't been clued into. I told myself I was overthinking it, that maybe I was just imagining things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I knew there was something happening between them, and it wasn't something I was a part of. It was a small shift at first, easy to miss, but by the end of the night, it felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. What was supposed to be a simple, relaxing night had turned into a night full of questions. And I didn't have the answers. All I had was a growing sense of discomfort, and a feeling deep in my gut that something wasn't right. As the night wore on, the unease inside me only grew stronger. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself that I was just overthinking things, but with every passing moment, it became harder to ignore. My partner's attention was no longer on me. It was on her, the woman who had caught their eye. I could see the way they were laughing together, how their conversations had shifted from casual to more private, more intimate. Every time they exchanged a glance, it felt like a silent language that I wasn't a part of. We'd been together long enough for me to recognize the signs. It wasn't like they were being overtly flirtatious, but there was something about the way they interacted that felt off. The way my partner leaned in just a little too much when she spoke, the way they both seemed to share these inside jokes that I wasn't included in it, wasn't the kind of thing that just happened naturally. There was something more happening, something beneath the surface. I found myself getting lost in my own thoughts, trying to figure out what was going on. I told myself to relax, to enjoy the night and not make a big deal out of nothing. But the more I watched them, the more I felt like I was being pushed out of the picture. Every time I tried to join in the conversation, it felt like they were in their own world and I was just a bystander. It stung, and I hated how vulnerable it made me feel. My partner had always been a bit of a flirt. They had this charm about them that made it easy for them to connect with people. I didn't mind it. In fact, I liked that they were outgoing and social. But this was different. This wasn't just a casual, friendly exchange. There was something about the way they looked at her, something that told me I wasn't the only one being noticed in the room. And it wasn't like I hadn't seen this before. I'd seen them interact with other people, laugh with strangers, share a drink with a friend. But this felt like something more. This felt personal. I tried to focus on my own drink, on the music playing, on the conversations happening around me, but every time I looked up, it was the same. My partner and her, standing close together, talking too closely, laughing a little too much. It was like they had created this little bubble around themselves, one I wasn't allowed into, and it made me feel small, insignificant. The more I watched them, the more the discomfort inside me grew. There was this tension, a quiet undercurrent that I couldn't ignore. They were building something between them, and I wasn't even in the equation. I couldn't stop myself from comparing the way they treated me to the way they were treating her. When we'd been alone earlier that evening, my partner had been affectionate, sweet, maybe even a little distant, but at least I could feel their presence. Now, it was as if I wasn't even there. I didn't know if I was just being paranoid or if something was really happening, but the feeling in my gut told me that something had changed. The whole night started to feel surreal, like I was living in a moment that wasn't mine. I tried to laugh along with the group, to play it cool, but I couldn't shake the thought that I was watching my partner slip away, slowly but surely, into something I wasn't a part of. The more they interacted with her, the more invisible I felt. I wanted to confront them, to ask if something was going on, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to ruin the night. I didn't want to accuse them of something I wasn't sure about. But it was becoming clear. I could feel it. The way they'd glance at her, the way they'd smile a little too warmly, it all added up. There was more happening here than just casual conversation. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more I realized how much I'd been missing. It wasn't just flirtation. It wasn't just harmless fun. There was something deeper, something that went beyond the surface. And as the night continued, I felt myself growing further and further from them. I wasn't sure how to process it. My mind kept racing, trying to piece things together, but the more I thought about it, the more it hurt. My partner and I had always been close. We had always been able to talk, to trust each other, but now, standing there, watching them share something with someone else, I realized how far apart we were becoming. And it hurt. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop watching. I couldn't stop feeling the sting of betrayal, even if it wasn't overt, even if it wasn't yet clear. I knew something was shifting, and it wasn't something I could ignore anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening. It wasn't just a fleeting thought or a passing suspicion anymore. It had become a tangible presence in the pit of my stomach, a weight that I couldn't ignore. I kept telling myself that I was just overthinking things, that it was all in my head. After all, my partner had always been outgoing, always enjoyed talking to new people. But as the night stretched on, I realized that this wasn't the same. This wasn't just a friendly conversation or harmless flirtation. This was something else, something deeper, something more intentional. It started with the little things, the glances exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, the way my partner seemed to laugh just a little too loudly at her jokes, the way they shared moments together that didn't include me. It felt like I was slowly becoming invisible. It wasn't just the physical distance between us that hurt, it was the emotional distance that had started to form. They were creating a space for themselves that didn't include me, a space where I didn't belong. It was as if they were starting to share something that I wasn't allowed into, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid. Maybe it was just the environment, the alcohol, or the vibe of the night playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I knew something had shifted. I could see it in the way my partner's body language had changed around her, in the way they seemed to lean in a little too close when she spoke, in the way their eyes lingered just a moment longer than necessary. It wasn't something I could explain, but I could feel it. It was a tension, an energy between them that I wasn't part of. I kept telling myself to relax. I told myself that I was being dramatic, that there was no reason to jump to conclusions. But as the minutes passed, it felt like I was losing grip on my own reality. I wanted to talk to my partner to ask them what was going on, but I couldn't find the right moment. I didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to be the jealous partner who overreacted. I didn't want to accuse them of something I wasn't sure about. But the more I watched, the clearer it became that there was something happening between them. Something that wasn't just about casual conversation or friendly banter. I tried to focus on the people around me, tried to take my mind off the growing knot in my chest, but it wasn't working. Every time I glanced at my partner, they were still there, standing just a little too close to her, sharing just a little too much. I could see the way they were connecting, the way they smiled at each other in a way that felt different, more knowing. It was the kind of smile that spoke volumes, the kind of smile that told me they were sharing something private, something I wasn't supposed to know about. It stung more than I expected. I tried to focus on the conversations around me, to talk to the people who had gathered with us, but I felt like a ghost in the room, like I was watching a scene unfold that didn't have anything to do with me. It wasn't like I was seeing something overtly sexual or inappropriate, but there was a shift in the air, an unspoken understanding between them that made me feel like I was being shut out. I could see it in the way they looked at each other, the way they moved together like they were sharing some kind of secret that didn't involve me. It wasn't the kind of thing that was easy to put into words, but it was there, hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. The more I watched, the more my chest tightened. I wanted to say something, to demand an explanation, but I couldn't. I didn't want to ruin the night, didn't want to start a confrontation in front of everyone. So I kept my thoughts to myself, but the distance between us felt like a chasm I couldn't cross. Every time they laughed together, every time they exchanged a private glance, it felt like I was being pushed farther away. The night was slipping away from me, and I couldn't get it back. As the night wore on, I could feel the tension growing. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but it was getting harder and harder to deny. The connection between them was undeniable, and I was left standing on the outside, wondering when it all started, wondering if I had missed the signs. How long had this been going on? Had I been blind to it all along? Or was this something that had just started tonight? The more I thought about it, the more the uncertainty gnawed at me. The fact that I didn't know made it worse. I couldn't figure out when things had changed, when the line had been crossed. But I knew, deep down, that it had. And it was a feeling I couldn't shake. I was trapped in a moment, watching something unravel, and I couldn't do anything about it. The moment the truth hit me, it was like a punch to the gut. We had left the bar and were walking down the street, the cool night air doing little to calm the storm that had been building inside me. I could barely look at my partner. I didn't know how to say what I needed to say, or even if I could say it without breaking down completely. My mind was racing, each thought tangled in a web of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. Everything had been so normal just hours before. Now, everything felt like a lie. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. The questions, the suspicions, they had all been building up, and now they demanded answers. I had to know what was really going on. I had to confront them, even though I wasn't sure if I was ready for what might come next. But I couldn't stand the uncertainty any longer. My mind kept replaying the images of them together, the way they had been so locked in their own world, laughing, sharing jokes, the way they had touched each other, even if it was just for a moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had crossed a line and I needed to understand what it meant. I asked, quietly at first, unsure if I could even get the words out without sounding like I was accusing them of something. But I couldn't hold back any longer. I asked about the woman, the one who had caught their attention all night. I wanted to know if something had happened between them. My voice shook as I spoke, but I needed to know. The longer I stayed quiet, the more the anger and confusion inside me would fester. My partner looked at me, their face unreadable. For a moment I thought they might brush me off, tell me I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid. But the silence that followed was worse. They didn't deny it. They didn't try to reassure me or calm me down. They just stood there, the weight of my question hanging between us. I felt the air around us thicken. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could barely breathe. Everything was happening so fast, and yet, everything seemed to be slowing down, like I was trapped in a moment I couldn't escape. After what felt like an eternity, my partner spoke. They didn't deny it, but they didn't come clean either. They just stalled. They told me it was nothing, that I was reading too much into it, but their words lacked conviction. I could tell they were avoiding the truth, skirting around it. It wasn't the reassurance I needed, it was more like they were trying to protect themselves, trying to deflect the weight of what they had been doing. I could feel the lie in their voice, and it made me want to scream. I pressed harder, demanding the truth. The words came out before I could stop them, the hurt pouring out with each question. What's going on? Have you been seeing her? Is there something between you two that I don't know about? I was trembling now, not from anger but from the rush of emotion that was threatening to overtake me. The words were out there, and I couldn't take them back. Finally, the truth came tumbling out, though not without hesitation. My partner admitted that they had been seeing her. It wasn't just one night, it had been going on for a while, hidden in the shadows of our relationship. They apologized, but it felt empty, like they were sorry they got caught, not sorry for what they had done. The weight of their confession hit me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to say something, but the words caught in my throat. How could they have been hiding this from me? How long had I been walking around, blind to what was happening right in front of me? As they spoke, I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. I didn't want them to see me break. I wanted to be strong, but inside I felt like I was falling apart. They told me that it wasn't serious, that it was just something physical, but the more they explained, the more it didn't make sense. If it wasn't serious, then why had they kept it a secret? Why hadn't they told me? Why had they been so careful to hide it to avoid any suspicion? None of their excuses mattered. The trust we had built over the years was crumbling, and I couldn't stop it. I stood there in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. It was like I was hearing the words, but my brain couldn't fully understand them. How could they have done this? How could they have betrayed me like this? The questions kept swirling in my mind, but there were no answers that could make the pain go away. All I could feel was this overwhelming sense of betrayal, and I didn't know how to move forward. It felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. Everything I thought I knew about our relationship was now in question. I didn't know who they were anymore. I didn't know if I could trust them again, if I could ever look at them the same way. The love I had felt for them, the connection I thought we shared, suddenly felt like a distant memory. It wasn't just the physical act that had broken me, it was the lies, the secrecy, the fact that they had been willing to tear apart everything we had for something they couldn't even explain. I wanted to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. And in that moment, as I stood there trying to catch my breath, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days felt like I was living in a fog, moving through the motions but never truly feeling like I was a part of anything. It was like everything I had known about my relationship had been shattered in an instant, and I was left trying to pick up the pieces of something that no longer felt real. I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my mind, the words, the silence, the painful honesty that cut through everything. My partner's confession had changed everything. I could no longer look at them the same way, no longer trust them the way I had before. Every time I tried to focus on anything else, my thoughts would inevitably return to that moment when they admitted the truth, when the weight of their betrayal had crashed down on me. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely alone. I couldn't talk to them about it without feeling this overwhelming sense of distance between us. Every time I looked at my partner, I saw nothing but the lies, the secrets, the things that had been kept hidden from me. It wasn't just the fact that they had been seeing her, or even that they had lied about it for so long. It was the way they had looked me in the eyes and told me that everything was fine, that nothing was going on, all while hiding something so huge from me. It felt like the trust we had built over the years had been completely erased in the blink of an eye, and I couldn't figure out how to rebuild it, or even if I wanted to. I spent a lot of time just thinking about everything we had been through together, about all the good moments, the laughter, the love that had once felt so genuine. But now, looking back, it felt tainted. How much of it had been real? How much had been a lie? I didn't know how to separate the truth from the facade, how to reconcile the person I thought I knew with the one who had betrayed me so completely. Every time I tried to look at our relationship objectively, I found myself sinking deeper into doubt. What had we even been? How could I have been so blind? I found myself avoiding them as much as possible. I didn't want to hear their excuses, their apologies that felt more like a plea to smooth things over than a genuine regret for what they had done. What they had done wasn't just about one mistake, it was about a pattern of deception, of eroding trust, and now I had to decide whether I could even live with that. Could I move past it? Could I forgive them? And even if I could I ever really forget? I had to give myself time to process everything. I couldn't just pretend it didn't happen, couldn't just gloss over the betrayal and move on like nothing had changed. I didn't know what I wanted, whether I should stay and try to make it work, or whether I should walk away and start over. The decision seemed impossible. My heart was torn in two, pulled between the love I still felt for them and the anger, hurt, and sense of betrayal that seemed to be eating me alive. I tried to talk to friends, but it was hard. No one really understood the depth of the pain I was feeling. Everyone wanted to tell me what I should do, to offer advice on how to move on or forgive and forget. But it wasn't that simple. How could I forgive something like this? How could I just let go of the fact that the person I trusted the most had lied to me, had sought affection and intimacy elsewhere behind my back? I felt betrayed on a level that went beyond just infidelity. I felt like my entire perception of reality had been altered, and I didn't know where to go from here. My partner seemed to be trying to fix things, trying to make up for what they had done, but their efforts felt hollow. They kept apologizing, asking for forgiveness, but I wasn't sure if they were truly sorry for what they had done, or just sorry that they'd gotten caught. They kept saying they never meant to hurt me, that it was a mistake, but how could it have been just a mistake? How could something that had gone on for so long just be brushed off as a single lapse in judgment? I wanted to believe them, I really did, but the evidence of their betrayal was too fresh, too raw. I had moments where I thought maybe we could rebuild, maybe we could find a way forward together. But those moments were fleeting, and each time they disappeared, I was left with the cold, harsh reality of what had happened. I didn't know how to trust them again. I didn't know if I could ever feel the same about them. The idea of being with someone who had hidden such a huge part of themselves from me, who had lied and deceived me for so long, felt unbearable. But at the same time, there was a part of me that didn't want to give up. There was a part of me that still loved them, still remembered the person they had been before all of this. I didn't want to throw that away. I didn't want to let go of everything we had built. But the longer I lived with the truth, the harder it became to ignore the fact that they had changed, and so had I. We weren't the same people anymore. I spent a lot of time asking myself what the future held. Could I ever move past this? Could I ever trust them again? And deep down, I knew the answer. The pain of betrayal wasn't something that could just disappear. It wasn't something that could be fixed with an apology or a few kind words. It was a scar that would never fully heal. The only question left was whether or not I could live with it, or if I was strong enough to walk away and start fresh, leaving behind a love that had turned into a lie.